Issues with the availability of fuel in Papua New Guinea don't appear to be easing. It's the result of major fuel importer Puma Energy being limited in its access to foreign exchange. Since the beginning of the year, there have been intermittent shortages. In an order last week from the country's police chief and pandemic controller, David Manning, that the central bank and Puma sort out the issues seems to have come to nothing. Don Wiseman asked our PNG correspondent Scott Waire about the impact of these shortages on the ordinary people of PNG.
The impacts are wide-ranging, and the more obvious impact of it is the airlines, how it's affecting travelers. Whenever there's a notice from Puma Energy saying that we will be rationing fuel, there's always a notice from Air Niugini saying that Air Niugini can't carry on with its flights because there's a restriction from Puma Energy. So it puts hundreds, sometimes thousands of people at a disadvantage because they're just about to travel. They've woken up in the morning, they are looking to travel that day, and then the notice comes out. I'm not talking about notices that come out days in advance. No, it's like a few hours just before boarding time that notice comes out. For example, just before the day when the French president arrived, we had another notice like that. For example, there was a workshop being run in Port Moresby, and we had two staff who were supposed to leave the next day. So they received the notice from Air Niugini saying that there'll be fuel rationing. Air Niugini has cancelled its flights indefinitely. That was at night, and they were supposed to fly at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it put them at so much of a disadvantage. They had to reorganize their hotels, they reorganized transport, everything else, and then eventually found out that they could travel, but much, much later in the afternoon when they sorted out, Puma Energy and the central bank sorted their issues out.
And what happens if you're between trips, if you're halfway through a trip?
I've seen instances where passengers have been really frustrated because they're transiting, and then Puma Energy releases a statement, Air Niugini follows up with another, and the passengers vent their frustrations at the ground staff. And it's not their fault. It's not the ground staff fault that flights have been cancelled. But because they're a representative of Air Niugini, they're representatives of Air Niugini, they get the brunt of the frustrations from travelling passengers.
Does the airline put people up in hotels if they're stranded?
Yeah, they usually do. There are some passengers that don't get that privilege of having been accommodated by the airlines, and that's where the frustration is, because you're dealing with multiple flights, and it complicates the situation at the hotels as well, because they've got their own guests booked in, and then Air Niugini has its preferences, sending guests to the hotels for them to be accommodated. So it has a domino effect on everything.
And what's the situation in terms of land transport?
In terms of land transport, especially in Port Moresby, where there's a lot of traffic, you have long queues at the bowsers all over the city, and people, sometimes they run out of fuel, and people start looking for the next service station to go and refuel. So the lines can be extremely long. They clog up the traffic. You can be sitting there for at least 1-2 hours just waiting to refuel, only to be told that we've run out of petrol, so you can maybe check the next one down the road. So situations like that, it's driven up costs for businesses. So you've got manufacturing businesses, you've got retail businesses, large shopping malls that have to run off generator power because there's fuel shortages. They have to plan for the next few months in case there are shortages. The situation's not made any better with constant blackouts by PNG Power.
Yes, now, we know this comes back to issues over Puma not being able to get enough foreign exchange, and this is because the central bank is keeping tight rein on foreign exchange because it doesn't want the kina to lose value. I understand that's the plan. Do we have any indication that attitudes are changing?
I don't see an immediate solution to it now, maybe not in the next few months, because the Prime Minister's issued statements saying, look, sort this out because it's affecting the country. Then you've got David Manning going one step further, issuing directives to the central bank and Puma as the pandemic controller, saying you need to fix this because it's affecting everything else. So I don't see that situation resolving itself over the next few months. It may continue for the next 12 months, maybe, and most probably until Papua New Guinea has a few mines up and running.